was the start of a process that connected her to society more intimately and securely than anyone had ever been connected before, because that connection, unlike at any other time in history, was made through the powerful and subtle bonds of the world's most cohesive unifier, self-interest. And it was in the spirit of that self-interest that Irma managed to happen upon a very valuable share.
Actually, doesn't Colony Park give away too much?
Well,
why don't we just go with legal? Why don't we just go with the legal?
Go with legal.
Go with legal.
Oh, you can do Empire State Center. Does that give away too much?
I'll go with legal. We can take Empire State.
You go with legal. We don't usually get along this well. It's kind of spooky.
Let us begin with the Lord's Prayer.
You gotta tell me.
Right. So pretty much what we have here is a sense of how the market system has pervaded every aspect of things we wouldn't even conceive of as being open to the market. And this is just a little example of how complete capitalism's triumph is in this world, and something that our hero would have never even considered until he actually has to encounter it. Though Justin had been on both ends of the litigation table, it wasn't his preferred modus operandi. He'd much rather duke it out mano a mano with an adversary and come to an amicable agreement than tie up everyone's precious time and money in lengthy lawsuits that, in his mind, fed the shark lawyers and bloodlet the litigants. But he was now in uncharted waters, and he was beginning to suspect that with the likes of Hector and the chairman against him, the legal system would probably be his best bet. The law was one of the many things that had changed a great deal since Justin's time. Although the notion of equal under the law was still, in the incorporated world, a dearly held principle, so too was the idea of minimal government. Indeed, Article 12 of the Terran Constitution made it explicitly clear that the government was not allowed to have monopoly status in any endeavor, service, or product it provided. The market had to be allowed to compete on an equal and fair footing as possible. The government could provide a service such as education or retirement if it felt it was needed, but it was not allowed to compel any citizen to participate for their own good, quote unquote, nor could they deny any private group the right to compete against them in providing the service. In the areas of law enforcement, fire protection, and legal disputes, the citizens could avail themselves of privately run services. In the courts, it was simply agreed by the disputing parties that should they prefer, they could use a private judge or a court service that specialized in such areas as jury selection, court location, records gathering, and a host of other areas that made going to court more convenient and efficient. These private courts, of which Justin was told Court was the largest, were continuously rated for judgments, honesty, timing, and a host of other features that influenced a buyer's decision. In cases involving crimes against the state, or in which at least one of the parties insisted, the government system would be used. Since government courts had to compete against the private court system, they too had become far more efficient at dispensing judgments. Still, partially for sentiment's sake, and partially because he wasn't comfortable with the corporation providing a magistrate for his trial, Justin opted for the public judge. Manny had also assured him in his case it wouldn't make much of a difference.
We'll do Mardi Gras, but we'll cut out some of the scenes. Mardi Gras and Empire State Center. Well, it's got to be one or the other. Colonial Park? Doesn't give away too much?
Colonial Park kind of comes. You really want Colonial Park?
All right, Deborah. Then she wants Colonial Park, and I'm married to her, so that's a yes on Colonial Park. You're reading it. Okay. You up for it? Sure. You sure? Because I could do it.
Boxes of here.
He wrote this speech. He's got to read it. That's great. Like we worked out that I got to do the Scotch one because I freaking love Scotch.
And
so
I really don't drink. Well, not Scotch.
So he gets to read this, even though I won. I just get the gratification of knowing I won, and that feels good. All right. So you are.
All right. In this scene, our hero is essentially the focus of a lot of turmoil. He is the unincorporated man in a completely incorporated world. His mere existence causes stress and difficulty. And at some point, you get the equivalent of a Rodney King type situation, and he's rather horrified. He does not want people to die simply because he's existing, and so he's going to try to do whatever he can to stop this from happening, including placing himself in the very heart of the riot to try to get these people to stop. And because of who he is, he gets them to pause. And in that pause, he actually goes ahead and says this. I was faced with a choice 300 years ago. Justin bellowed to the crowd so as to carry his voice as far as possible. He needn't have bothered. The media bots made sure that he was now live on everyone's digisys, and his voice wasn't just being carried in the park. It was being carried live over the entire Earth, and as an uninterrupted feed to Mars and the billions beyond. My choice, he continued, accept death or try and do something about it. Almost all the billions of people before me had accepted the inevitable. I did not. The crowd broke out in applause. Justin waited for it to taper off. Of the few hundreds from my time who had tried to escape their fate, only I am alive. Justin waited for the crowd to absorb that salient fact. How many people did I have to kill to be here today? How many bodies do you think I'd bury for the right to stand here, very much alive, at this moment? What faces haunt me in the middle of the night? He waited a good 10 seconds before continuing. None, he shouted. Not a single soul. That is, not until now. He sensed the crowd's confusion. Good, he reasoned. Let them think about that. For the rest of my life, he continued, I will have to wonder how many people will not see their moms or dads, their children or their friends, because I chose to save myself. From the crowd came cries of no, and not your fault, and blame the corporate SOBs. Justin quieted them down again. Do you think this one free man wants a single one of you hurt? A single one of you killed? I want you to have all the things humans used to only dream about. Family, love, happiness, and freedom. These are your birthrights. The applause was deafening, and again Justin waited for it to subside. These are your birthrights, but they cannot be purchased in blood. More thundering applause. Sean Dougal demanded blood for the faults he saw in this world. Sean Dougal paid the price he demanded of others. But know this, I am not Sean Dougal. I do not want the life of a single person as a, he paused for added emphasis, of disgust for his next word, sacrifice. He made a purposeful allusion to Sean's last message and hoped it would have the mitigating effect he desired. If you need blood for your outrage, he said, bringing his voice to a crescendo, then start with mine. More cries of no were heard, and it took Justin 5 minutes to coax the massive crowd into silence. Your lives, he continued, may not be perfect, but that does not mean others must die. If you don't like what's going on in your world, then do something about it. If you don't like being owned, then don't own. I swore to own no part of another human being. You don't have to either. Protest the injustice inherent in incorporation by not playing a part in it anymore. Divest and be free. Justin has to pause as the crowd took up the chant of divest and be free. When he got them quieted down, he continued. If you don't want incorporation, then change it. If you hate being tagged like some animal, go on the neuro and get a shield. He had to stop as the crowd started to repeating his words. My friends, he pleaded. Please do not, I repeat, do not bathe your actions in blood. More applause, less tentative this time, more enthusiastic. Trust me, he said, coming to his close. The prize will not be worth that cost. The only request this one free man has is that you all leave here in peace, that you all go home and decide how you want to bring about change, without death and destruction. Nothing would make me happier than knowing that all of you made it home to your families safe and sound. Let not one among you suffer harm this day. Let us all depart in peace. It took a moment for the crowd to realize that Justin had finished speaking. It was only when he had started to make his way back down the arch that the chanting began anew. Perhaps it was because this most famous and glamorous of men truly seemed to care about all of them, for no reason other than that he cared, with no reward or profit to be gained. Or perhaps it was because they'd simply grown tired of the looting. Either way, the people seemed to love Justin Cord, and now they shouted that love out at the top of their lungs. One free man, one free man, one free man, was heard from one end of the park to the other.
Thank you. Since we have lots more books to sign, we're going to cut the reading off there, but we will entertain a few questions if anybody has any about this world, about the person, about anything about incorporation.
This is for our ringers to actually come in and You're not a ringer.
Yeah.